Hey, it is Quinn, and I am psyched to try something new today and really get creative. I, as many of you know, I come from marketing and working in business a lot. And one of the big frustrations that I've had over the years is just how little time we give ourselves to test and try things, and how that really stifles our creativity, makes it very difficult. So there's this big push of, I got to get it right on the first try, or I've got to think and plan so much that I'm not actually trying things. Like one of my favorite quotes that used to justify this behavior was the one that, I don't know, it's been attributed to Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, about if I had 4 hours to cut down a tree, I'd spend the first three or whatever sharpening the axe, right? And while there are some really good principles to that, I think one of the perfectionist ways that I kind of worked with that was thinking almost that I had to over plan and overthink everything in my head before actually taking action, actually trying something. And what I've definitely learned in business is, especially if you're doing your own thing, you're creating something that you want to share with people, there is a lot that you can plan and figure out in your head. But often once we actually start doing it and we're sharing it, we're putting it out into the world, it takes on its own life. And so there's often this phase where it kind of turns into something different, something that surprises you. And I do think that one of the advantages over the years, or the times that my business and things in my life have like really worked and have grown, it's not because I had the perfect plan, but it's actually because I kept showing up and trying stuff. I was actually playing and in the execution, and I was feeling faster so that then I could learn what worked faster. And so obviously I'm not, sharing this podcast or even coming to you today sharing that example saying I've figured it all out. Anybody that tells us they've figured it all out is lying to us. Life is not easy. Life is complex. We're all dealing with human brains and emotions, a lot of programming, a lot of just everything inundating us, so many expectations. Like we're all navigating all sorts of different situations and circumstances, and what works for one person may not work for another person. And so just sharing that from the lens of like, that's the practice that I've been in. And when I'm in that practice, it is really helpful for me. And so I'm trying to apply that practice to the podcast, because you may have noticed that before last week's episode released, there was a pause. If you've been following the show, if you're new to the show, then it won't feel like a pause at all. You'll just be excited because here's episode 7. But if you have been following the show, you'll notice there was a pause. And a big reason why that pause happened is because I'm really deconstructing a lot in my life right now, mentally and emotionally, and like trying to go sane, honestly, and just recognizing all the areas where there is just still insane kinds of thinking happening, which I think comes from a lot of different factors and areas, including just like some of the ways that I was raised in a high demand fundamentalist religion, and then just our societal structures and beliefs that have us really programmed to believe certain things about this is the way life is, or this is how you should be. And so I've been just in a massive deconstruction phase, and it's messy. And so it's been hard to come on and say, I'm going to record a podcast to share some helpful tips and insights about how you can live in flow on fire, when I'm not necessarily feeling very in flow and on fire per se. Or maybe I feel like I am actually on fire, meaning like in a bad way. Like there's a fire in this house, it is burning down, which is part of the reason why I love that verbiage of in flow on fire, because it fits all of those different ways that we can do life. But what I've really come to this week, after trying to record this episode multiple times with a totally different plan, is just remembering that some of the podcasts that have been such a powerful gift in my life, that I have found the most value in, were actually not the podcasts with the 10 tricks and the here's how to do it. They were actually more the shows where they took something that I was really interested in and wanted for myself, and they were talking and sharing about how they were putting it into practice, what it actually looked in their life looked like in their life and what some of the struggles were, as well as some of the wins. And man, I just really find that there, especially in the information age that we're in right now, or I mean, I guess we're kind of moving out of that information age because we have so much information all the time that it's kind of overwhelming. Like, and I am very, very interested in things like, hey, we all know in logic how to be healthy and how to be well. So why am I still needing cookies and wanting cookies all the time? Or like, why do I still have so much pinned on food, right? Or why don't I exercise? Like, I think it's so fascinating that there's this way that we can kind of bypass this whole internal world and our emotional state and like how to actually get in alignment and get clear. And we just like think we've solved it or we've learned it with our logic. And then we think we should be good from now. Like, oh, I heard the 10 tricks. Oh, I wrote down that helpful hack. And now my life is solved. My life is amazing, but it doesn't ever work like that, which is in some ways kind of frustrating. And in some ways, thank goodness that life is an adventure and it's not like a math problem that's just easy to solve. And once we've found the solution, we're just good, right? Not saying like this is though the premise of why I've been focusing on going sane is because I do see in my own life how a lot of the thoughts and beliefs that I've had are leading to the outcomes that I'm not wanting, and or they are really burning up my energy. And so the way that that would look is like just burning up my energy with feeling anxiety or feeling stressed, feeling overwhelmed, feeling depleted, right? These are things that I've been recognizing that I'm like, this logically doesn't make sense. Like logically, everything in my life looks pretty good, pretty clean. Like we're okay. There is literally not a fire going on, but emotionally, there can feel like there's a fire going on. And so I wanted to just shift this podcast a little bit. This actually was more around the original intention. And for some reason, as I got going, it was just kind of easier to find that gear of, hey, here's some things that I've learned and I hope this is helpful. And I want to shift more into sharing, hey, here was the weekly breakthrough, or here's where I'm at on this practice of living in flow and on fire. And just like if you were, going to a yoga class, for example, then you're going not because someday you're going to get perfect at it, and you don't believe that the teacher is perfect at yoga either per se, unless you're maybe brand new to it. And so instead you recognize you're going to the yoga class because you know that that practice is supportive to you in your life, and that when you're in that practice, then it makes the other parts of your life a little bit easier to manage. And so what I'd love to invite you into is to just join the inflow and on fire practice with me, which just means as you listen to the show and as I'm sharing my story, my hope is that it sparks your own cognition and awareness of what inflow on fire feels and looks like to you. And even like, I love the idea that I don't necessarily even have to define those terms fully, because those terms could mean something very different to you, but I still believe we'd be talking about a very similar thing. And so I think at the core of this, what we're really talking about has to do with aliveness and alignment and feeling good in our own skin, feeling good in our lives, finding meaning and feeling free to be able to live in a way that is meaningful to us, right? And so that's what I would like to shift and focus on. So I feel like to kind of kick this off and help these kind of weekly updates. And by the way, I am going to be bringing guests on. I have some incredible guests lined up, and it's going to be a very similar type of thing with them as well, of just getting curious. Like, what does this look like for you? What does your inflow on fire practice look like to you? Which, by the way, everybody coming on, they won't have consciously thought, oh, I'm in an inflow on fire practice, but they are people who I see living in flow on fire and creating really inspiring things and living meaningful lives, being very intentional. And so that's to me, living in flow and on fire. That's what I want to get clear on, is their stories, their insights, and that kind of thing, so that we can all learn from each other and just continue to build and strengthen this community of people who are living intentionally and meaningfully. So that's where we're going. And in order to set you up for success, I would like to give you a little bit of background information about my own story, just to give you context of, where I'm coming from when I'm sharing things, because I think that context will be helpful and will help make sense of some of the things that I'd like to discuss and break through. So one of the really important themes in my life has really been this theme of empowerment, which comes from a space of feeling very disempowered for honestly the large majority of my life. And a huge reason where that feeling comes from is I was raised in a very high demand fundamentalist religion. Many people who are raised in this kind of religion, and who have left, definitely refer to it as a cult. And I definitely have days where I agree with that. And so I think, the definition of cult is a little bit, there are lots of things that could be considered a cult. But the big thing, just for the context of this story, or like how this impacted me, is this feeling of growing up with, there is one truth, there's one way to do it. If you're not doing it or not aligning to that, you're wrong, you're bad, you can't have love. It, you may not even be safe, right? And so a lot of my sense of safety, or my sense of self, was connected to doing the right thing, right? And that there were always like two choices, and there was the right thing and the wrong thing, and you got to choose the right thing or you're screwed. And that type of very binary black and white thinking, and a lot of other things that happened, actually created a lot of trauma in my experience. And on top of that, I was raised by, really honestly, very beautiful, loving parents who also came out of this same type of belief system in a very intense way, had their own wounding, and thus, created a lot more wounding without realizing it, I believe. And so through this type of thing, I lived a very, very controlled life in a lot of ways. I wasn't allowed to grow my hair long. I had to keep my hair short. I wasn't allowed to close my door of my bedroom unless I was changing my clothes. Because of the personalities that I was raised with, like, I was constantly needing to, return and report about absolutely everything that I had been doing in any given day, which made it feel very made me feel very small and smothered and stifled, and like it was very, very confusing and difficult. I'm trying to be very sensitive as I'm talking about a lot of these things, because I have a lot of respect for my parents' journeys, and a lot of empathy for their parents' journeys as well, and what kind of led to this. The more that I've learned about our family history and the pain and the trauma that's happened there, it makes so much sense why this happened the way it happens. And so I don't feel it's constructive to just like pin a lot of blame on them, or believe that I'm like a victim and really take on that identity. But the way that things happened, and the level of like anger and shame and intensity that was directed at me as I was growing up, was very, very difficult. Even the ability to like do something, like I wanted to dance, like that was a dream of mine. Like I wanted to be a ballerina, and it had been from when I was very little. And I was not able to do that. And the reasons I was finally given, as I asked for years and years, and finally got this incredible opportunity, if we randomly moved to a new house next door to people who owned a ballet studio, what are the odds, who said, "Oh my gosh, we'd love to give you lessons, Quinn, and we'll give you a discount," because they had always kind of given that reason, that money was the reason. And then finally came out and said, "No, you can't be a dancer because that would be immoral, And that would mean you would be immodest, and you would wear clothing that would make boys and men have sinful thoughts about you. And you wouldn't be, it would likely lead you, kind of down that path to hell with Satan. Like, it's a slippery slope, like all of these reasons. Like, it was just ballet, but like all these reasons where it, built up a lot of shame and beliefs and a lot of mistrust in myself about, is what I want okay? And am I able to do that? And so, being raised in that type of a situation, and under so much pressure all the time to make the right choices, but really just to stay safe in my own home and not be verbally and emotionally ostracized, attacked, gaslit. It was a struggle. I had to hide my feelings a lot. I had to just try to like make everybody happy around me. I grew up hyper vigilant, hypersensitive about what was going on in my household because it did not feel safe. And even though they were, I really believe that saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I don't believe in a real hell, but like the hell that we create for ourselves, the pain we create for those around us as well, like that hell is paved with good, that road to hell is paved with good intentions. People who think that they're doing the right thing and are trying to show up with love and are actually creating a lot of pain without realizing it or intending to. And so with that came a lot of trauma, and I'm definitely leaving a lot of details out, trying to be sensitive to these people that I do still care about, and am wanting to be cautious of how I speak publicly about some of this, or just mindful. And not because I fear my own safety, but because I believe wounded people wound each other, right? Wounded people wound others. And so it's very difficult for me to hold up my own wounding and have a battle cry and make them really, really wrong and bring shame back to them. Like, I want to be a part of the solution of creating a safer world for all of us to live in, including them who are those of us who are, still transitioning out of some of those really scary belief systems. I mean, if you look at, the belief system was based in Christianity. And I was just realizing the other day just how terrifying it was as a child, believing that there was God who loved you, and then there was Satan who hated you. Okay, like I don't know you, but okay, he already hates me. Okay, great. And he wants to take me down. Like, at every moment of the day, no matter what I could be doing, it's certainly whatever I could be thinking, like he could be tempting and tricking me and deceiving me, even making me think that what I'm choosing is the right thing, but it's actually the wrong thing. Like, it was absolutely terrifying. And I am somebody who, when I believe something, at least thus far in my life, 40 years in, I will take it wholeheartedly, literally. Like, I very much have grafted into binary thinking, black and white. Oh, this is the way it is, and this is the way it isn't, very naturally and easily. That's really worked for me. And when you tell me something, I'm going to believe it. And of course, now I've developed other skills like logic and reason and creative problem solving. But as a child, I certainly didn't have those skills. And so this kind of logic was absolutely frightening. I was terrified of the dark. I was terrified of scary movies. I was terrified of bad vibes, even. I was terrified and could not understand how my parents, when they were, what felt like very easily, like I was walking on eggshells all the time to try to avoid their anger and beratement. Like it was very difficult for me to reconcile that with these messages about how we love each other and we want to be like God and like Jesus, and we just want to love each other. And it didn't feel like love. And even like the God I was taught at church didn't feel like love. It felt, and I wasn't able to understand this until later than life and see that, oh, it's because it was conditional. It was conditional love. I had to do the right thing to stay safe with that God, just like I had to do the right thing to stay safe with my family. And so these types of beliefs, however we were raised, whatever the situation, they absolutely do affect us and in adulthood. And I'm sure if you're listening to this, you have some sense of that as well. And I've been very curious and interested in how do I just go in and clean some of that up. I ended up having a really big breakdown over the past couple months, and I want to talk about that in actually the next episode. I'll give you more detail on that if you're curious. It's like a train wreck. Do you want to see the train wreck? It's kind of interesting. Maybe it's like a true crime podcast, where you're like, this is voyeurism a little bit, but like I can't look away. So if that's interesting to you and you kind of want to see like what was that struggle like, and then how did I pull through it, or what was helpful, I would love to share that story. And if it's helpful, or if I'm just saying it for myself, either way is fine. But I won't spend time talking about that part here. But because of that phase and the insane breakdown that happened there, I reached out to this incredible, she calls herself, I have the terminology right here, a spiritual director. And her name is Britt Hartley. And I found her through TikTok, of all places, as I secretly believe all good things are. I'm a huge fan of TikTok. But she was just speaking some massive truth bombs that really related to what I was feeling and experiencing. And honestly, like with the breakdown that I was having, I was really wondering, what's the point of anything? Like I was at a point of life where I was just in, we could say, massive depression, where it was just, as I'm laughing about it, it absolutely wasn't funny, and depression isn't funny, but I'm just laughing at it with like throwing my hands in the air. It was a wild experience. And so I went to her after hearing all of this really great knowledge and wisdom that she was sharing, and she helped me see, like, Quinn, you've done so much work over the years and you've grown so much. But like there's still old scaffolding from those original belief systems that you were given as a child, from your family, from your church, from all of these places. And so instead, like moving forward and like trying to just manage your anxiety with those still kind of in place on some level, what about going in and really intentionally rebuilding? And so this just was a hell yes in my heart. This is exactly where I want to go. This is exactly what's calling to me. And side note, I have done a ton of belief breakthrough work over the years. I've spent massive amounts of money and years in coaching and therapy, and already have worked through so much of this. But this concept of rebuilding was a really powerful like reminder to me. So ironically, earlier in the summer, I had kind of drawn up this map of like, what is this feeling of captivity, where we just feel like stuck and like we can't quite do the things that we want to do, or we feel fear and shame around wanting something different than what we have in life. And with my old belief systems, that was very easily, quote unquote, dismissed by saying, well, this is just the way it is, or well, this is just the way that God wants it. Oh, well, this is just your life plan unfolding for you, which I can get on board with or I could get on board with on some levels. But the more that I've learned, especially how to work with my own brain and like what is actually real in life, the more that I see how there's just faulty programming in our brains, and that a lot of the ways that I was gauging whether something was right or wrong, they actually aren't solid ways to make great decisions long term. And so I've just been deconstructing and deconstructing more, and deconstructing even more of just like how to do life from a space of alignment and peace, and live primarily in alignment with my core values. One of my core values is absolutely kindness. And I believe that, that's very different than being nice. It's not conditional love either. It's like this space of just truly caring for someone. as a soul, as a human, and like reaching down and from our humanity to somebody else's humanity to care for them, to be truly kind and good to each other. So kindness is a major value of mine. So however, navigating that value and leading my life from that kind of a value, and how to do that in a way that still also maintains some level of boundaries. I've gotten into trouble in the past with kindness being, I just need to make everybody feel good all the time, which turns into people pleasing and perfectionism there, which is not healthy either. It also can like very easily turn into very loose boundaries and, kind of letting people walk all over you, doing a lot of things that you don't want to be doing, that are a strong no for you, and minimizing your needs and concerns and prioritizing somebody else's above yours constantly, to the point of where you lose your sense of self. And so just in this deconstruction, I wanted to just, to wrap up this thought today and in this little bit of story, I wanted to just share, as I'm just gauging whether there's more of my story that's helpful to share. Yeah, I guess let me just tell a couple more things that will be helpful, and then we'll move forward. So the first thing being that because of this very pressure cooker of a situation that I was raised in for the first 18, 20 years of my life before I got married at the age of 21. So really went from like being a child in this household straight into marriage as a very young person, because that's what is pretty normal and even encouraged in the religion that I was raised in. And which actually I'm happy to share. It was Mormonism. It was a very orthodox version of Mormonism, very strict Mormonism in the way that I was raised. And not everybody that has been raised or has experiences with Mormonism has those types of experiences, but that was my experience. And so, with that pressure cooker of how I was raised, moving straight into then getting married, I was having all sorts of like somatic, physical illness and things showing up in my body that we went to tons and tons of doctors for and tried to figure it out. And finally, after the end of, getting every test under the sun, including spinal taps and seeing all sorts of specialists on everything from neurology to ear, nose, and throat to cardiology. I mean, just absolutely everything. Every specialist, every test you could take, I took it. And towards the end of my teenage years. And at the end of that road, when finally they couldn't find anything wrong with me physically, they sent me to a psychiatrist, and I was diagnosed with rapid cycling bipolar disorder. Now, one of the big breakthroughs that I have had recently actually was recognizing what was actually showing up in those symptoms was childhood trauma. And it wasn't, I was misdiagnosed with a mental illness because nobody understood it back then. And even being able to diagnose some of this now is a new thing. And especially I live and grew up in Utah, and so a lot of the therapists and or psychiatrists that were practicing came from those religious belief systems, and that does kind of cloud some of that professional judgment sometime. And so it wouldn't have been spotted that way either, meaning that a lot of the ways that I was raised might seem normal to a lot of the professionals here. Though my therapist was horrified. When I started going to therapy around after this diagnosis, she was very clear to point out, this is not normal. This is not healthy. This is traumatic. This is, and so that was helpful. But I believed for years that I had a mental illness, and it created a whole other slew of trauma and intensity in my world. Even at one point I was taking $2,400 of medication a month just to cope. And I know that number because at that time our insurance was such that we had to pay for it out of pocket. This was in my young marriage, pay for it out of pocket and then receive reimbursement from the insurance company. Insanity. And it was such that my physicians at the time, like my OBGYN and my psychiatrist, said that I should never have children because I am, I have that type of illness, mental illness, where I might be a danger to my children. I might actually, kill them or kill myself, and it could be tragic. And so I was horrified, especially, you know, like didn't seem like something I would do. And this is what professionals are telling me. And so we're trying to follow all those rules and do all the things. And so over time, of course, I did end up having children. But I had to break myself out of all of these boxes. So the first box had to break myself out of was the box of this really constricted family structure and very domineering way that I was raised. And helped break through with that into then getting married and trying not to repeat similar patterns, and had some really big struggles in the beginning of our marriage. Then I got this mental illness box placed around me, and then found like, hey, I don't want this to be the rest of my life. I don't agree with this being like a mental illness diagnosis can feel like a death sentence. At some point, I'm hoping to talk about this more because it is something that I feel very passionately about. And I also haven't known how to talk about it, because I do feel like when you have depression or anxiety types of diagnoses or experiences, thankfully, those have become a lot more normal to talk about. And it's a lot more like, it's people won't, there's no less stigma around it. But that is still not the case if you are diagnosed with something like bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, Tourette's, and any of the other major mental illnesses. And with all mental illness or, emotional struggles like anxiety, depression included in this, there is just not research and support out there of like, what does a long-term great life look like for somebody like this? It's a very, very focused on symptom management, and not necessarily that there is a way out of that. And so something that really struck me and helped me to break through from that box was reading from Joseph Campbell. I was just going to look at the book if you're watching this video. And he talks about how when somebody in a tribe in a certain indigenous area showed signs of, I think he was referring specifically to schizophrenia, and or bipolar, he was saying that in those cultures, instead of shaming or like, making an identity about that, the people would rush them to the medicine woman or the medicine man of the tribe. And they would then seek to, really mentor and work with that child, because they knew on the other side of that illness, that child would become their next medicine man or medicine woman. And he was referring to some of these mental illnesses as being, it's like you're thrown out into the ocean without knowing how to swim. And so it just, by learning that and hearing that concept, it turned me on to the idea of just how important it was to actually build skills. And so I went and participated in the NAMI organization's meetings, NAMI, the National Alliance for Mentally Ill. And I found insane value out of those meetings. If this is something that you're struggling with or someone NAMI is an incredible, incredible organization. And one of the reasons why I stand so wholeheartedly beside it is because they actually teach you skills. They teach you how to swim with whatever it is that you're dealing with inside. And so through some of those skills, and then seeking out and learning my own skills, like a lot with nutrition and homeopathics and natural remedies, and how to actually support my body to feel better and to not have some of these things happening, I was able to get myself off of medication. And I haven't been on medication or needed it for the past 20 years now. And so, well, let's see, 18 years, 19 years. Yeah, my son is, I quit, or I was able to get off the medications, and I got pregnant pretty quickly after that with my first, and he's going to be 18 very soon at the time of this recording. It's just a couple months away. So, that was one of the boxes, but still something that haunted me until just this realization recently, as I've been really working on and deconstructing and looking at what happened and what was my experience, and recognizing just hey, there was childhood trauma that was misdiagnosed as a mental illness. And because of that mental illness diagnosis, it just built more and more of a belief around myself that I couldn't trust myself. I couldn't trust how I feel. I couldn't, I might be a liability, or like just all these other fears, like skeletons in the closet or ghosts haunting me of, possible realities and ways of being. And so in spite of all of these things and being raised to become a mom, which was a very cute, interesting message, I didn't even go to my school's high school career day in high school because I knew that I would only have the choice of going to one of two colleges. Well, meaning church colleges that were Mormon colleges, and that of those colleges, there were only certain degrees that I would be allowed to study. Being a teacher or a nurse were the only options. And so I didn't even bother going to that. And even though I had this burning dream of being an artist and a fashion designer and doing things artistically like that, I just knew it wasn't a possibility. And so I really just resigned myself to, okay, this is what God wants. This is how I stay safe here on earth, is by doing what God wants and, becoming a mom. And so it felt like this very noble thing that I had broken through this box of a mental illness and had learned all these skills and tools to then be able to become a mom, to fulfill my calling here, to fulfill my reason for being here on earth. And which I now look at and think, goodness, that's a lot of pressure to put on my kids, that they are, them being here is fulfilling my reason for being here. And I do believe that motherhood is noble, but the amount of pressure that I experienced and that was put on it, I don't believe was healthy and didn't make me feel like I was truly at choice, because it was kind of a choice of like, do this and like, you're going to be safe and you'll get to go to heaven, or don't do this and you won't be safe and you're, things don't look great for you for eternity. So, your choice. Not a choice. So a couple of boxes, right, that I was breaking through, and then becoming a mother and realizing, man, motherhood is hard. And like, then having 6 pregnancies in 9 years, with that situation as well, because I was just trying to be a really good Mormon mom and be very righteous and obedient and stay on God's good side. Then, it created all these other things like, struggling with finances. Like, my husband and I were not prepared financially, or we weren't really prepared for the real world in so many ways, being raised in this type of an environment. And so we didn't come out of this thinking, oh, to have 5 kids, we need to have an income that helps us provide for 5 kids. It was like, we have 5 kids and God's going to bless us and everything's going to work out and we'll get the perfect job. It'll just come to us, and like, we'll have the money we need. And if we don't, then we know that we've got to clean something up with being more righteous, and then we'll fix it. Like, whew, pretty intense way of thinking. And so this kind of opened a tiny crack in the very back door of my life, where, I had been raised to believe that I should not be a working mom on any level, that like working moms were bad moms, that I was able to help my family out by trying to do little side hustles and little side businesses. And turns out I was pretty good at it, and grew aggressively in that space and kept just breaking through more and more boxes of captivity and old ways of thinking, to then be able to create a really successful business that I had for over 16 years. And then, later become an executive at a major marketing company, where I was the chief marketing officer and led the sales and marketing team, which was an incredible experience as well. And so I just feel like, at least for my story, I have just so much empathy and compassion for those of us who have had lives, because I believe we all have this experience on some level, and some of us have more extreme. I know my story would sound very, very tame to most people, or to a lot of people who are in a lot more intense of a belief system and structure. And also, I know that there's just threads of all of this experience that we can all relate to. And so I think, like, the big thing, that the macrocosm of what I see happening and how I believe my story relates to all of this is that, with Western society, we really have this idea about, um, just being safe. Like everything we do is about being safe. And a lot of our belief systems, especially in society that was built on a Judeo-Christian model, still have some of those old remnants and scaffolding from that Judeo-Christian model as well. And that, leaves a mark. It leaves us believing the world isn't quite safe, that we can't quite trust can't quite trust things, and that things are scary. And so some of the things that, have been really profound as I've been processing a lot of this over the years is, one, I found this incredible book called The Wisdom of Native Americans. Living in Utah, out in the West in the United States, I really have resonated and been so fascinated by the Native Americans and indigenous people of this land, and also really feeling the contrast of my own European ancestors and all the Europeans who came, annihilating that whole group of people and taking over, like genocide and murder, just taking over this entire country from them. And so I've been very fascinated by, the wisdom that they have, and their thoughts about what was going on in this whole situation. And so one of the things that I learned and I loved, I just want to share a quote from here that really summarizes where I think, like, here again, that intersection of my story and our greater Western society's situation and story. So this is by Chief Luther Standing Bear of the Oglala Sioux tribe. And he says, "Nothing the great mystery placed in the land of the Indian pleased the white man, and nothing escaped his transforming hand. Wherever forests have not been mowed down, wherever the animal is recessed in their quiet protection, wherever the earth is not bereft of four-footed life, that to him is an unbroken wilderness. But because for the Lakota there was no wilderness, because nature was not dangerous but hospitable, not forbidding but friendly, Lakota philosophy was healthy, free from fear and dogmatism. And here I find the great distinction between the faith of the Indian and the white man. Indian faith sought the harmony of man with his surroundings. The other sought the dominance of surroundings. In sharing, in loving all and everything, one people naturally found a due portion of the thing they sought, while in fearing, the other found need of conquest. For one man, the world was full of beauty. For the other, it was a place of sin and ugliness to be endured until he went to another world, there to become a creature of wings, half man and half bird." An angel, I'm sure he was referring to. "Forever one man directed his mystery to change the world he had made. Forever this man pleaded with him to chastise his wicked ones, and forever he implored his God to send his light to earth. Small wonder this man could not understand the other. But the old Lakota was wise. He knew that man's heart away from nature becomes hard. He knew that lack of respect for growing, living things soon led to lack of respect for humans too. So he kept his children close to nature's softening influence." Whew. Like, mic drop, right? If we just let him speak for now. So good, so powerful. And really what I took from that, what was so profound, was this sense that, I could relate to so much of that. I could relate to how he's describing the Europeans, this need to conquest, to conquer, this need of, seeing the wilderness as a dangerous place that needed to be, civilized, right? That needed to be tamed. And I could feel within myself the ways that my, wild soul that came into this world and was looking for harmony with everything around me and looking for that connection to nature and life itself, learned these ways of the European settlers and their religions that sparked this, because they're still active, still being passed down to our society and to children today. of really not trusting the wilderness within ourselves and outside of ourselves, and getting so disconnected from nature and our natural rhythms. And so I feel like the story of my own experience in this world is really a story of, setting myself free, of understanding what it's like to be born in captivity, in this space where you believe that that you need to do these things to be safe, right? You've got to do all the right things to be safe or to be loved or to matter. And the pressure that puts on our psyches. And I had a massive dose of that led to trauma and being misdiagnosed with a very serious mental illness. That had I listened to all of those experts, I never would have had my 5 children. And I would still be on medications. My life would look 1,000% different than it does right now. But because of trusting that inner voice inside of me, because of getting curious about, is this really the way life is? And being open to other people and other ideas, other ways of doing life, it's brought me to where I am now, which is a space where I have, an exponential sense of freedom and possibility. And I've been able to create and experience so many incredible things, including this major shift right now from working in corporate America and shifting into being a full-time artist and illustrator, like I've been dreaming of since I was that teenager that didn't think I could go to career day and have what I wanted, right? Or live in alignment with where my heart and soul was calling me to go. And so I think that this what happens when we are raised in any level of some sort of captivity, which, by the way, I looked up that definition, and I think it's fascinating for anybody, regardless of where you are. But let's see, I'm going to find it really quick because I brought it into my notes. And now I've gone on some other fun thoughts. And so I'm no longer in that space. Okay, I think it's right here. Here we go. Okay, perfect. So yeah, the difference or the definition of captivity. I've almost got it. There we go. Confined to a particular space and prevented from leaving or moving freely. Ooh. So, of course, that could mean like you're in captivity, meaning a prison, or like for zoo animals, you're bred in captivity, meaning you're not out in the wilderness living life as a normal bear, but you're born in a zoo, right? You don't have the ability to leave or move freely and do that. And so to me, as I look at this, from the macrocosm of how does my experience relate, in so many ways, I'm very, very grateful that I got to experience a very extreme version of some of these just structures and old ways of looking at how we do life and work with each other, because it opened my eyes to how this is infiltrated, this type of thinking, whether it's from our Puritan ancestors within the United States, or if, in Europe and so many other places where it was a theocracy. And the belief was that the ruler of that country was God's representative, and that his posterity were still the people in charge and God's representative. And there's a caste system of any sort. Like all these types of models come from these places of how do we live in harmony with each other, and in one model believing that we've got to control everybody and we've got to control things in order to have safety and freedom, and people believing they need to largely be controlled, or believing that those structures are keeping them safe from the dangers outside, the dangers of survival in the wilderness, right? And I'm not saying there aren't real dangers that inspired that. There absolutely were when that occurred, but certainly in our global economy and as things are progressing, I just see so much unrest and anxiety and overwhelm and depression, and people really, really struggling to not feel lonely all the time and to have a sense of community. I see our youth really struggling as a mother of 4 teenagers right now. The extremely high suicide rates for teenagers is a major concern of mine, and something that I, especially having walked through recovering from my own trauma and processing through mental illness and living a reality where I believed I had a mental illness, and that those types of things like suicide were a reality, is something I could do, then that, it's concerning to me about our world. I feel like we are also still so wrapped up in stories about superheroes by and large in our society. Um, like the Marvel and DC empires are just growing strong and just churning out as many of these, you just get a superhero to save the world from destruction types of storylines, where we have to vanquish our foes, we have to destroy the enemy. I think that so much of these stories are just really pointing at this larger issue of, believing that we've got to have this type of power over us, like a god or like a government or a societal structure, to keep us safe, and that we are actually powerless to change things in our own lives and in our own worlds unless we have that permission of some power outside of us. And I see so many people with beautiful, brilliant business ideas, especially having been a mentor in that space for such a long time. I've been working with so many beautiful entrepreneurs and incredible souls. I see the majority of people still holding themselves back, still telling themselves they're not ready, and just waiting for permission, waiting for it to feel safer, waiting for them to feel more ready, waiting for somebody to beg them to do it. I don't know, but just waiting and not doing it. And so when I think of that definition of captivity being confined to a particular space and prevented from leaving or moving freely, it really feels like such a hallmark of the current Western human condition, and potentially farther than Western. I only know the Western, having lived in that, and so I couldn't speak to the other types of models. But this is why I ask myself questions like, why do so many humans stay confined to the same city, state, house, life, etc., that they've always known? Isn't that being, on some level, feeling maybe like they can't move or live freely, or they need to stay in a particular space, right? Why do so many humans feel they can't move freely to try new things and be who they are and express themselves? Why is so much of history just repeating? The world has become more safe in so many ways for much of the world, but overall, we're still struggling with a lot of the same types of problems and issues that we've struggled with for a long time. And then overall, just why does this place, Earth, society, still feel like such a mess? Why does it feel so damn hard to live together and get along? And why are we so disconnected from nature and our own hearts and souls? Why are so many of us so cruel to our own selves, and don't speak kindly to ourselves, don't give ourselves the benefit of the doubt, and believe that we have to just keep doing more to measure up? And so I think that, while a lot of this speaks to larger issues and certainly systemic issues, within patriarchy and capitalism and theocracies and just all sorts of things, something that I find really, really fascinating is that, back to that Native American wisdom or indigenous wisdom here in the US, I think it goes back to this belief and idea that we need to control our circumstances and the things outside of us in order to feel safe, or we need to side with the powers that will control those things to keep us safe. And that there's this whole beautiful wilderness out there, and this whole other way of living and being in harmony with our surroundings that is an option to us if we are brave enough to take it. And suddenly it changes our lives from being, living in anxiety and stress and fear and holding ourselves back and playing small, to suddenly feeling creative and engaged and energized and excited for life, having passion for life, and devoting yourself to things that really matter to you and that align with your values. And so that's really the heart of what I feel really inspired to share. Like that's the journey I'm on with this inflow on fire practice, is how to go more sane by seeing the world as it really is, instead of in these kind of fear-based, stressful ways of thinking that have been so easy to assume this is just the way the world is. And if you're someone like me who has also done a lot of belief breakthrough work and mindset work over the years, I think that for me, this has been the next level of just deconstructing even deeper on some of the ways that I just thought this is how life worked. And what I'm finding in this space, which you'll understand a little bit more after next week episode, is that this space of living intentionally, this is very different than what I was taught with a lot of the common mindset belief kinds of things that are out there, that are talking about how, if you do these things with your brain and you think this way, then you can have anything you want in life and anything can come your way and your life can be incredible. And if it's not incredible, then you got to clean up your brain. What I found in a lot of that was the same type of thing that I was raised in, and just a different flavor. And I didn't see that for years. I operated in those structures for many years, believing it was something different, and found myself still in this space of perfectionism, of needing to have perfect thoughts and perfect energy and take care of my health in the perfect way, and take care of even self-care in the right way, and do things right in order to be okay, in order to be happy. And I'm just finding it, with everything I've been deconstructing, life is one crazy, beautiful adventure. And I am more interested in how I can flow with it with less stress and more delight, and, wake up to my days curious and wondering what's going to happen today, even if I have some plans and ideas. But like letting myself be pleasantly surprised has been a really fun thing to play with lately. I've noticed that at the end of the day, where I used to be, judging, was this a good day because of, did we get a lot of things done? Did we live according to our plan for the day? and shaming myself, berating myself if I didn't, with those internal thoughts beating you up. And then now recognizing, as I've been in a practice of more like just getting curious about my life, curious about what actually brings me joy, what actually feels really good. And it's been really funny, some things. It's like typically my favorite parts of the day when I'm lying my head on my pillow and I just think about like what parts delighted me today, or what parts really meant a lot to me today. And it's most often, without a doubt, the surprises. It's the things I wasn't planning. It's the conversations I didn't intend to have. It was, the funny thing that somebody totally shocked me by saying. It's those things that make my life feel so rich and meaningful. And so, of course, we need to have some structure and some sort of like way to function in modern society. But I'm finding like I used to put so much pressure on all of those things and on myself that it sucked the fun out of life completely. And I just was drained all the time, just surviving the weeks to get to the weekend, even though I was doing it with a smile on my face. And I thought a high level of joy and capability on this other side of this deconstruction, and really just looking at more ways I've been in captivity within my own mind. I am just overjoyed to find this incredible, beautiful wilderness of life, and the insanely insane and like incredible adventure it is, and what's there. So I hope that is, well, I hope it's inspiring to you. I hope any of this makes sense. And most of all, I'm just, if you're listening and made it through, it means a lot to me to be able to share this story, and to have a witness to it. I think that sometimes it's very easy in life to just go about living our lives and kind of just showing up to the day to day and not really thinking about who we are, or what's going on. And I know for my own life, because of a lot of the trauma, and that, yes, I've overcome so much and have received so much support on, and that, yes, there's still obviously remnants that affect me on the day to day, that there has been this space of, a lack of compassion for myself, and also this space of feeling very alone in it, feeling like also this sense of feeling very fractured about my story, like feeling like I've lived 30,000 different lives instead of just one life. And so I've been bringing and working together to pull those pieces back together, to remember myself. And sharing my story is a way to do that. And so I really appreciate your kindness and grace in listening, and hope that on some level it serves and supports you with more courage to share your story as well. I think that our stories are so healing and supportive, both to us and to the listener. And so, I would love to see a world where we are all feeling more inspired to share our stories and to find validity in our own experiences and not need outside forces to tell us whether we have a good story or not. Um, but just to share our experiences, to share our hearts, and to recognize we're all human, having this crazy wild adventure of a human experience. And how can we love each other during it? How can we be kinder to ourselves and to others? And how can we create and live a little bit more intentionally, rather than just going on autopilot or believing we have no control and hoping that people on the outside or the powers that be fix things for us? Because I do think that we have a lot more, I don't want to say the word control because there's a lot of charge in that word, but a lot more autonomy and sovereignty in being able to make great decisions for our lives, and choose to live lives that are really intentional and full of meaning, in which we have really strong, beautiful relationships with the people we care about, as well as being able to express and bring things into the world that we've been dreaming of doing and being and creating. So that's my dream. I hope that it inspires you as well. And I would love to hear your dream, um, and hope that you have an amazing day.